I get really, really anxious and stressed about things beforehand, but like years and years in advance. Like I'm scared that I don't have enough money saved up for when we retire, which is like 60 years from now. But those are the things I'm afraid of.
Get out what you're putting in. All your hopes and efforts are all in vain. Who will pick you up when you've lost everything? Does it all become for granted with a wedding ring?
Here we go. What am I doing? Okay, what's up guys? Hello. I am here to introduce to you the Enneagram number 6. I highly encourage you to watch the explanation and the purpose and the motivation video that I will have down in the description, a link down there, so you can check that out, just so that we can be on the same page and we can look at the Enneagram and use it as a tool as a Christian instead of as a reason for everything, but as a tool. So in this episode, we have 8 people that I interviewed that identify as Enneagram number 6. And the Enneagram number 6 was very interesting to me, just the way that people think and the way that people process things is very fascinating to me. I have some of my best friends in this episode and some people that I don't know as well. So it was a real good treat to be able to interview these people and to see their life and their faith. So I hope that these stories inspire you, encourage you, point you back to Christ, and remind you that you are truly not alone. So without further ado, I present to you the Enneagram number 6.
We're going to talk, this preview is going to be the essential message that this number received often as a child, and it was a wounding message, or a message that told them they're not enough, they're not worthy, it's not okay. And then I will also give you the essential good message that they need to hear, the thing that their hearts are longing to hear. Number 6 is, you can't trust yourself. That's the thing you've learned. You can't trust yourself. You don't have everything you need. And the message that you want to hear is that you are safe. You're safe. We got you. Loyalty is something that is so important to them. They feel that they do not have enough in themselves, that they can't trust themselves. So they are looking for outside authority to be loyal to. People like to say they hold the world together. Your communities, your churches, your boards, your teams, your classes, a lot of them are 6s. And that's why loyalty is so important, because they are very loyal. So once they find you are safe, they are super loyal to you. It might take a little bit longer to get them to open up because they might not be sure that you're a safe person to open up to. And they're really good about seeing the big picture, the community, the wellness and goodness and the needs of the community. When they walk into a room, they're assessing any points of danger, any points of threat or problem, maybe. So if there's a person that they're in conflict with, they know where they are. They're really, really good on teams because they're like the little indicator light. Something's wrong. This is not it. People can be frustrated with that. They can feel like 6s are kind of Debbie Downers. They only see the negative. And that can happen in unhealth, but 6s, when they're healthy, are very practical. They have the rescue plan. Like, they take pride in that, and they're really good at kind of seeing the problems that could happen and managing them. They need security, they need a plan, they need to have assurances that you're even aware that there could be a problem. It's frustrating for them if they feel like you're not even listening to them because they're like giving you real advice. They're okay with us versus them. I am safe. We're okay. My community is safe. My tribe is safe. My nation is safe. They like building armies. And they like building social structures too, but they like to be prepared for danger. In relationships, they can self-destruct sometimes because they can see all of the ways it could go wrong. So they have a hard time with trusting their emotions, trusting that that person really does love me. So they have to do some work in terms of like knocking on the door and be like, do you love me? And that person would be like, yes, I do. And they're like, okay, great. Just had to check. They have a hard time trusting people. And again, like the one who's being critical, because they have an inner critic, 6s have a hard time trusting people because they can't trust themselves. There is an awareness that if they're poking at themselves, oh, look at all these reasons why I can't trust myself. They can also do that to other structures or to other communities. They can kind of poke holes in it and be like, I can't trust you. Look at this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And it's this idea that you have to connect to an authority figure or a larger structure in order to be safe. So they give energy to religion. They give energy to law enforcement. They give energy to, because those are the structures that make them feel safe. They give them order in the world. So that's why like a lot of your congregations are full of 6s, because they show up, man. They're here, they are contributing to society, but they can't do it in themselves. They contribute to a larger structure. You know, like they're not like leading the charge with them at the head. They're like the communalist. They're like leading the charge with 10 other people. And they can lead the charge and they can be world changers and shifters. It's that they do not do it in themselves, in their own strength. That humility is really beautiful. Typically, they can feel safe in a larger structure or a smaller structure, but they give authority and agency more readily to a group than to themselves. Their anxiety kind of gets them caught up, and it's hard because what they want is to be safe, and it's the ultimate betrayal if they have put their hope for safety in a system that has turned out to be unsafe. They have a lot of self-doubt. What do you think? Trusting that you have something to contribute. And it's in that super unhealthy place where it's just like, I have nothing. I can't trust myself, my emotions, my head, my feelings. They're kind of the hard thing they have to wrestle with is anxiety, but they can be really, really courageous. When they are centered and feel safe, that's when they actively can move out of that space, out of their comfort zones courageously. That's when they can be really great advocates for people because they're able to see, you're unsafe, you need to be safe. Come here. And so that energy can be really useful, and they can, instead of kind of crumbling to that anxiety that makes everything really kind of uncertain for them, they can really move forward in that confidence and that courage. So essential for a 6's growth is to find their center, their person, or, you know, who their personality is, what their soul is, and trust their gut, trust their emotions, trust how they respond to things. 6's feel like they know themselves and they don't like it. And they're like, no, it's not enough. I can't build a world off of this. It's not strong enough. I must partner with a church or a school or a nation. And that's another reason why their journey of faith is so beautiful, is because they really think of the Lord as their rock, their foundation. And that language is so important for them. The Lord is someone they can rely on. And as they grow in their experience of God, and they see, again, you show up for me again and again and again, you prove that you are trustworthy over and over and over, because that's just who God is. And they're able to access that trustworthiness of God. They're able to release their energy so that they can do other things because they're no longer worried about assessing information. Is this safe? Or am I okay? Am I okay? They're like, I'm safe. And now I'm safe. I can move forward in an attitude of courage and conviction and confidence.
So I'm Emily Leeper. I'm from Saginaw, Michigan. Currently, I'm at the seminary with my husband.
Well, I am Aiden Moon, and I'm originally from Colorado Springs, Colorado. And currently I'm at Concordia Seminary in St. Louis, Missouri. And that's what I'm doing now.
My name's Carly Romine. I'm from Kansas. I've been living in Lincoln for the last 2 years. I am working as an RN at the hospital in Lincoln as a emergency department nurse.
My name is Brianna Sanford. I am originally from Lockport, Niagara Falls, New York area, so that's by the falls, woohoo, by Canada. 10 minutes from Canada, almost, something like that. I am currently in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I am practicing as a music therapist right now, and I am going on year 4 or something.
Heck yeah. Whoa.
I'm Amelia Bovinghausen. I'm currently living in Fredericksburg, Texas, but I'm kind of from New York and Pennsylvania and Ohio and all over the place. Right now, I'm just getting into my second year of marriage, and my husband's a pastor, and I have a 6-week-old daughter named Charlotte.
Guys, hello, I'm Noah Berger. I am from Davenport, Nebraska, and currently I am a seminary student at St. Louis.
My name is Paige Esser. I'm from Columbus, Nebraska, but right now I live in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm a music teacher.
All right, well, my name is Mark Young. I am from Seward, Nebraska. I currently live in Lincoln, Nebraska. Currently, I'm a project manager with the Army Corps of Engineers.
And I am a 6.
My number is 6.
My Enneagram number is a 6.
My Enneagram number is 6.
And I am a 6.
And I'm a 6.
Oh, and my number is 6.
We're talking about deadly sins. So your deadly sin as a 6 is fear. And I can explain that to you. No, just kidding. You know what that means. Would you agree with that? And if so, how do you deal with that?
I would say, yes, I definitely agree with that.
Oh my goodness. Yes, absolutely yes.
I would agree with that because fundamentally behind a lot of, what we as humans just experience with day-to-day life is fear.
I 100% agree with that. I'm afraid of a lot of things, and I wouldn't say it in phobias.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with it, but I wouldn't disagree with it.
I had a little bit of an existential crisis. That was like, oh, I am afraid of everything.
I spend a lot more of my day than I would like to talk about or admit to, worrying about things that are never, ever going to happen.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely agree with it because I see myself being scared of so many things. And the funny part about it is when you sit down and talk yourself through it, it's nothing major. It's just it's no fear that nobody else would have, but you definitely have to work at not letting that get in the way of what you're doing.
I'm pretty sure if I had more money, I'd be like one of those doomsday prepper things. I've definitely thought about what would I do if people started dropping bombs on us? And obviously I have zero way of actually preparing for that. Even just like going to a restaurant or something like that, like when we sit down at a table, I'll be like, oh, okay, what's the fastest way out of here in case I need to do that? It's a part of my life to that point.
But for the most part, it's not like just outright abject terror or something.
Yeah.
There's just this sort of underlying sense of things are not how they're supposed to be. I tend to worry more about like existential things. I do worry and have anxiety about like physical things, but I tend to be able to go like, well, everything's gonna be fine. I'll have some nervousness, sure, but nothing like crippling.
I can handle things like family members who are dying, or walking into hospitals, like big anxiety things that I really don't have any control over. But when you get into little things like, do people like me? Did I sound stupid? Is this paper enough? Do I look stupid?
Because for me, if I don't have those stable relationships in my life, that's when I kind of start going down the bad side of my personality, and just living in fear constantly. So that's definitely something that I struggle with.
I definitely am very, very scared of a lot of social situations, because instead of seeing myself in terms of how I should see myself and what I should be doing, I see myself in terms of how everyone else sees me. And that's just really hard to deal with things when you're finding your value from other people. If I do something that I have done in the past, there's security in I know I'll get the same results. And it's tough to really put that aside and really let go and try something new and try to get over your own fears.
I'm never 100% confident in myself. So I'm like always second guessing my thoughts. Like I never know what to say is like when to say it is the right time. When I'm not sure of myself, I don't like retreat. I like have to be like outward and like, hey, I'm faking it. Look at me.
I just naturally was very fearful of a lot of worldly things. And if you imagine that, as well as how much more we think in our own minds, oh yeah, absolutely thinking about both sides of the coin for everything. In addition to that, I am diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, which is essentially a fear of everything. Thankfully, I've been given a lot of coping skills and I've worked a lot through a lot of those fears, but it's definitely something that's always there and definitely a root.
My therapist actually told me this most recent thing that we were doing together was he was walking me through the worst case scenarios. Like if two coworkers are talking about me, he would walk me through the worst case scenarios where he's like, okay, if they are, what happens after that? Well, they're upset with you. Do they come and talk to you about it? Maybe, maybe not. Worst case scenario, they do, and they get angry at you. At the end of the day, you still have friends, you still have a husband, you still have Jesus. Everything is going to be okay. Is it going to be a little bit awkward? Maybe, but it's not going to be the end of the world. And that's kind of been helping me cope with it a little bit more.
Just telling myself like, well, you shouldn't be afraid, like doesn't help. It's something that I have not solved and I don't expect to. And in some ways, knowing is half the battle. And it helps me to go, other people are dealing with this challenge or this problem in a more helpful and stable way. And that's possible for me too. I am doing this not because this is an innate thing that has to be this way, but because it's challenging my need to have things be stable and under control.
Yeah. The best thing I try to do is talk through things. If I get trapped in my own mind, I think that I'm the only one thinking this thing, but then you start to see other people's opinions on things and how they handle situations. And you start to realize, I'm really not alone. There's other people who make the exact same choices.
Thankfully, going to school to become a therapist, a music therapist, you learn a lot about coping skills and mindfulness and relaxation. And in addition to my diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder, I have also found that mindfulness is a great thing. So I love to meditate. I find myself wanting to be in places that don't have a lot of sound, that are quiet, that are relaxing, making sure I have time for myself.
I have to talk about it. I know that if I just let it sit, like I will not get anything done. And it will just be a horrible weight on my shoulders.
Faith is how I kind of try to combat that. Reading the Bible, remembering what God has to say about me, and that what God has to say is obviously truth. And that is the opposite of what fear has to tell me, and just trying to keep myself on the right thinking path.
I primarily deal with it by going to Holy Scripture and remembering my baptism and that I'm a child of God, and going to Holy Communion where I can have that tangible assurance of forgiveness and that Christ is coming again.
There are things that I'm afraid of, the fear of the future, the fear of the unknown, but that's life in my opinion. Knowing that God is in control, it's like, yeah, I have these fears, but at the end of the day, like, God isn't going to put me in a situation where I can't overcome that issue or that fear. My solution whenever I come to a fear is like, well, let's just keep pushing. Thankfully, God has been with me through all these fearful situations and has gotten me through them. It is kind of ironic that my deadly sin is fear, and I have a tattoo that says, "Fear not, for I am with you," says the Lord. I always like that Bible verse because being in the military, I've been in situations that are scary or, high risk activities or situations. And just knowing that God is with me is like, well, we'll get through this.
The next question, we kind of touched about this at the beginning when you talked about the basic fear and desire. And the basic fear for a 6 is being without support or guidance, and the basic desire is to have support or guidance. Mm-hmm. Does this sound familiar? And if so, why do you think
relationships, stable relationships are extremely important to me. And when those start to fail at all, I feel very stressed and out of control. I don't like to feel out of control, and that drives the fear, and the fear drives the control. I'm a definite planner. I can tell you what I'm doing for the next 4 months daily. I know that if I am in control of my schedule, it relieves a lot of stress for me. In the unknown, that's kind of when my stress kind of boils up, because if I'm not in control, I guess I'm worried that something's not going to get done, or it's not going to get done correctly, or I'm not going to have time to be prepared for that.
I remember when I started my job for the first time, the first half of the year was really hard because I just didn't know what dynamics were at play. I didn't know which teachers liked me, which teachers didn't. I didn't know their personalities well enough. They have definitely operated as more of like a 6 my entire life. But because of how worried and scared that I was, I felt like I needed to make peace, and I needed to just agree with whatever was around me, dampening my personality like very, very deeply. That kind of grasping for that support system made me try and make peace with everybody around me so that I wouldn't kind of make those waves.
I really want mentors. I really want someone that I can rely on, someone who can kind of give me guidance and direction, really crave that, really want to learn from them and lean on them and glean all their knowledge. I seek relationships, people, things that are going to give that to me. But because I want those things, I also don't trust in any of the things that I'm looking for that in. And so there's always this sense that even if I'm in a good situation, there's a little bit of a sense that this could all go away. And even in really good relationships, that I'm not worried that the person is going to give me bad advice, but this person could die. I mean, there's those kind of fears.
Yeah.
And it's not even in my mind, I wouldn't say it's even a fear, but just a sense of don't get too grounded in this. I have a very constant awareness of those kind of things, which is exhausting, rather than oh man, I'm the little anxious person worrying about everything, always stressed out. It's more just this underlying sense of stress, always feeling like I have to have a backup plan.
Okay.
For everything.
Yeah. But this one is specifically talking about the head, the heart, and the gut. So 3 numbers are driven more by the head, 3 numbers are more by the heart, 3 numbers. Not to say if you're in one that you don't have a heart, or you don't have a head, you don't, that kind of thing. But it's saying you're more driven by that one more. So 6 is in the head triad. Based on the road back to you, they are driven by fear. They take in and relate through their mind and tend to think and plan carefully before they act. They ask, what can I do to fix it? And this book says that 6s forget this. Based on what I kind of just said, what in your life can attribute to being in this triad?
I mean, if I say something and I hadn't like thought it through, I'll sit there and like repeat that sentence like over and over again in my brain. So I'm like, oh my gosh, did I say that the right way? Like, what do they think of me now? Or like vice versa, like when I'm processing information, if someone says something and then like the conversation ends, I'll like sit on what they said and then make up like what I think they thought because of that or why they might have said that. And I like over analyze it big time. Even like my first year of teaching, like I thought I had to do everything like the right way. Felt like I had to write down word for word what I was going to say so that I wouldn't mess up or like do something wrong because I wanted my kids to feel supported and all that. But now I'm like, me, whatever happens, happens. Gotten better. I'm a good teacher, I promise.
No, I believe it.
And like, it's funny because my boyfriend will know what, if I'm between things, he'll know what choice I'm going to make by the end of it, but I don't know that, and he won't tell me, but I'll eventually come around to it. We're just almost analytical in that way. We're almost contemplating all of the pros and cons of each option. It becomes this huge quick jumble, and it's like, and that's why I think fear is just a big part of that, because there's so much going on with all of this, and then eventually the answer comes. And I know this is a big time that I turn to faith when I'm having this, because I get this a lot, and sometimes the right answer isn't obvious. Sometimes it is, and sometimes that makes sense and everything aligns. Like you said, you're like, why is this confusing? Because sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's very obvious. This is the answer. This is the path I'm supposed to be on. But a lot of times I know the right answer, but I know that I'm not really sure of the right answer. So just help guide me.
The struggle with the thinking kind of triad is you want to solve everything through your head, when in reality you aren't able to control everything. So in a weird way, one of the hardest challenges, you have to let go of things. So I could see myself forgetting things on purpose so you don't have to deal with it. A lot of fears are very irrational, and I won't be able to do anything about it. You can't not think about it, but thinking about it won't do you any favor. So you just have to find a way to stop. I don't want to try to address it in an emotional heart side way, because to me that won't solve anything. So if my options are to keep thinking about it and nothing happens, or just to keep living my life, you always end up living your life, and which is kind of infuriating in some ways, because as you go through life, you rack up a whole bunch of things that I wish I could solve, but they're just kind of there, and then you feel like you haven't done anything. You don't necessarily want to do a whole bunch of work that ends up being worthless by something you don't see. That's how you evaluate whether or not it's a problem that's worth solving. I think about nuclear power way too much.
Okay. Like in what way?
Well, it's annoying because like it's the answer, but other people don't see it. But me thinking about it won't solve anything. I'm kind of out here living my life, and me thinking about it won't help it anyway. So I just kind of have to let go of it, even though it's the answer. And I get frustrated when other people don't see it.
So the next question is about the stress and security numbers. And the stress and security numbers mean that when you are stressed or insecure, like unhealthy, you go to the negative sides of one number. You don't become another number. You just kind of access some of the negative qualities of one number. And then when you are secure or healthy or confident, you go to the positive sides of another number. As you being a 6, when you are healthy or secure, confident, you go to the positive sides of the 9. And when you're stressed or insecure, you go to the negative sides of the 3. So the 3 is known as the achiever or the performer. And obviously there are really good things about the 3. Some of the negative things about the 3, unfortunately, are they're very performance-based and achieving-based. So sometimes that can be like their identity, like putting too much of their identity in what they do and like how they perform. And they also can like overwork as well. They can be very competitive. In like, you know, competition can be a good thing in a way, but it could get into the unhealthy as well. And their deadly sin is deceit as well. It doesn't mean that they're always like deceitful, but they care a lot about what other people think about them, and sometimes they deceive people a lot in order to like get them to see how they want them to see them, just so that they can be appreciated and looked at as like this really successful person. So do you think like the unhealthier sides of the three, do you think that you can relate with that?
Is when I'm anxious, it's always me trying to do something to make sure everything's okay. Like when I started dating Garrett, before I started dating Garrett, because I didn't think that was going to happen, I used to like try and be as perfect as I possibly could. Like I would spend hours trying on different outfits to make sure I looked good enough to like be okay with everything. I want people to see me as like I'm intimidating. Like you know, you're not quite sure what to do with me, but you might want to be me because like you're not quite sure what to do with me, but you're kind of scared.
Do you like that?
Part of me likes it just because I'm like, yes, power, but I'm like, no, maybe that's not good. No.
You know, there's a lot of times in my life where I'll say yes too many times, and I'll, you know, get myself in a position where I'm like, man, I need to find something in my schedule to get rid of, you know, to drop off my plate. And it's hard because so many of those different things that are overworking me, they're hard to drop off the plate, you know, to say, you know what, this is something that I can't be doing right now. I'm going to sideline it. You know, when you do that, you feel like you're letting someone down in terms of someone says, hey, can you help me with this? And you're like, yeah, sure. And then, you know, it comes to that day and you're like, man, why did I volunteer for this? Or why did I say I could do this because you've got a million other things going on for work, school, family stuff. So yeah, I think there is a level of being overworked, you know, in different aspects of my life. But, you know, I'm not a huge fan of like
the positive side of the 9. So the 9 is known as the peacemaker. The fact that they are motivated by that peace is mean they kind of go with the flow sort of situation. They are okay with like other people and kind of try to bring the peace like in situations. And one of the really good qualities of the 9 is that they can access the different positive qualities of all the numbers because they so like peacemakers. So they can get along with like a wide variety of people. And yeah, they're a little bit more laid back, kind of go with the flow, not as kind of stressed as sometimes the 6 can be. So do you think that you can kind of relate to those kind of qualities when you are like secure and healthy?
Unnecessary confrontation. You know, I think that there's a lot of people out there that are just there to like, be confrontational and argue. And it's like, that's not necessary. Let's figure out a way to like come to a conclusion and move on.
Like when I'm healthy, I'm like super easyggoing and non-judgmental and accepting of others. And this isn't me trying to puff myself up or anything, but I know it's going to sound like I'm humble bragging over here, but I noticed that when I walk into a group of people and I'm feeling really good about myself and I'm like just ready to go, like I'm a lot of fun and can, if I want, sometimes, you know, be a bit of the center of attention when I'm just, you know, doing my thing and totally, you know, not really caring if, you know, what people are thinking too much. So I can be pretty easygoing and very non-judgmental, which is really hilarious because I can be stupid self-righteous and judgmental when I'm freaked out. Like accepting others, it's like, oh, you like that kind of candy? Yeah, okay, sinner. You know?
I'm bringing in Bible characters for each number, and not to say we can't say that we can type Bible characters. And obviously we don't know them. They're kind of in heaven and we don't know them specifically, but there are some characteristics of them that are similar to like some of the numbers. And so it's pretty much I'm bringing them in to like talk about and also, you know, to ask if you can relate to them in any way. 2 characters that I brought in are Ruth and Peter. For Ruth, you know, she is a very loyal person to Naomi, her mother-in-law. Even when her mother-in-law is like, go and leave, you know, I can take care of myself. Ruth is like, no, I will go where you go. I will stay where you stay. A pretty fierce loyalty that she has. So there's that aspect to it. And then with Peter, he was the one that Jesus was literally like, you know, when Jesus said that he was going to go die on the cross, Peter's like, whoa, Jesus, you don't have to do that. And Jesus literally said, stand behind me, Satan, because this is my mission. And then, Peter gets out of the boat when he sees Jesus walk on water. And then when he sees the winds and the waves, he gets kind of fearful of it. But at the same time, Peter was a great, obviously, leader in the church, and God used him in many ways, even though he did fear that, and he did doubt and question sometimes. So based on kind of what you know about Ruth and Peter and kind of what I just brought up, do you think that you can relate with either one of those characters?
It's kind of funny that you say Peter. Peter's actually one of the people in the Bible that I think I've related most to my whole life. I guess if Peter can be a friend of Jesus, then I guess anybody could. Because Peter having all of those doubts and even saying, no, I don't know the man about Jesus, that story kind of spoke to me the most. Having that fear and having that anxiety and trying to answer and please the people around you, and then immediately realizing that it's the wrong thing to do. I very often feel anxious about the people that I care about going through something that's difficult. My first instinct is just oh, don't worry about that, I'll take care of it and it'll be fine. I obviously don't know Peter, but I feel that's might have been one of his motivations, is he wants to be somebody worthy that Jesus can stand next to.
With Ruth, how she was extremely loyal, I would say that's definitely a big quality of me. Once I make a relationship with somebody, it's extremely hard for me to break that relationship in any way, and I will kind of do anything to make relationships last, even if they shouldn't necessarily last any longer. I will drop everything that I can in order to further our relationship and in order to help that person. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
Peter particularly, I think it's easy to see him sort of as the impulsive disciple. And I do identify with the sort of and I talked about the ebbs and flows of how I am, of being really all in, go for it, invested, and then also being whoa, okay, now I can't do this. And that's definitely true. I see the getting out of the boat, which, because the virtue of 6 is courage, which is ironic, but that is within me. There is that capability of doing these pretty cool things. But then I also just am going to second guess myself.
Yeah.
I also even see the sort of brashness of Peter has that sort of devil's advocate. I mean, I guess literally devil's advocate at one point. Maybe a little bit of a rebelliousness against authority, those kind of things. I definitely could see that.
Yeah, I'd say so. Probably more with Ruth than anything, because of very much her loyalty. I mean, I've used the line where, your people will be my people, your God will be my God. I've used that with Garrett moving down to Texas, your team will be my team,
I love the loyalty in that. Sometimes I even question it, but 6s are like that. If we find someone or if we find something that works, we are not going back. We are sticking with it till the very end, for the good, and we're there for the bad, which makes us great in relationships, especially because we're not the ones to quit when the waters get tough.
Yeah, I think so. I think, with Peter, not to dog on myself, but, there's times in my life where I feel like I kind of falter, and kind of question a lot of things in my life where, I want to be that reliable person, like Peter was to Jesus, but Peter, he faltered and ended up almost drowning, and then he kind of denied Jesus 3 times. I think that there have been situations in my life where I wish I would have been a little more loyal or reliable. I'm sure Peter thought that as well after denying Jesus 3 times. So yeah.
From the aspect of Peter, I definitely feel like I'm that way. I am really eager to try new things, but when I do, seconds before or even in the process, I'll back out of it, and then I'll only do it halfway, and then nobody ends up happy or nobody ends up with the result that they want. Trusting in yourself's one thing, and I have a really hard time trusting myself, but trusting God is something that I struggle with probably more than anything. I get in my head so much about that. I'm okay, Paige, you can fix this. You can fix it on your own. You can do this on your own. And they're no, you can't. Let it go. Just relax. Just take it up to God. But that is something I really struggle with. I would much rather follow and trust someone else because I know I can do that. Whereas when I'm pushed out of my comfort zone into a place where I have to be in charge, the only person I have to trust or to follow is God. Then it's oh, where do I go from here?
Along with the doubting and questioning God, I mean, those are huge things in and of themselves. Along with those things, there's also just the general fear of what if there is no answer. That's what I really struggle with. You ask really, really big questions of God, and it's really tough when sometimes there is no answer. It becomes kind of a big power struggle where you have to recognize, you know what, it's not really about me. It's all in His care. It's really, really easy to invest trust in God compared to people when I know that He may not give me immediate answers to things in my life. If I put trust in Him, it will always be there. You have to trust in the Lord with all your heart, soul, and might, and not lean on your own understanding, but we're tempted to.
So the next question is, do you have any Bible verses that have helped you in your life? They don't necessarily have to be about, what we're talking about being a 6 or anything like that, but they can if you would like. Any Bible verses you would like to share that have helped you throughout your life?
1 Corinthians 13, just defining like the whole list of defining what love is. God is going to be patient. He is going to be kind. There's honestly nothing worse for a 6 in the entire world than knowing there's a giant like being up in the sky that can literally do whatever they want. And like that is such a fear-inducing thing. If you don't remember that there's like the love and the patience and the kindness and everything inside of that.
The second half of Romans 8 is one that I regularly come back to. For someone who lives in a state of worry a lot of the time, there's a deep peace in the fact that there is going to be restoration. Becoming a Christian is not like, the hole is filled, I'm complete person now. There's still a sense in which that is fleeting. And so the promise of Romans 8, it's not just me, but all creation is groaning. Everything is waiting. There's this sense of anticipation in the whole world and all people. That's a grounding hope for me. Not to say that this is a bad thing, but there's an abstract kind of like you die and go to heaven kind of thing that's almost a cliche. That the creation that God made, that we are a part of, and one of the most important parts of, that is deeply, deeply, deeply broken, is not going to be broken anymore. It's going to get, torn down to the basics and then built up again, and we're part of that. That's pretty amazing.
When Jesus tells us that like He will never leave us or forsake us, for me that's big, obviously, because for me, like, relationships and stability is huge for me. Knowing that like God, my relationship with Jesus is stable, and that He will never leave me or forsake me for any reason, is something that I definitely try to remember. And so knowing that I have that stability in God is really important to me. So I definitely dwell on that a lot.
To you, Job 22:21.
So that's part of that trusting piece, right? When you have all that fear. I was in 4th grade, I went to a Bible camp, and one of the counselors loved the book of Job. And since then I've been like, I really need to sit down and read that. And here I am, I don't even know, I was probably like 10 when I went. Here I am like 12 years later going, I still need to freaking read that. Years later, oh my gosh, I'm like 26 now.
My favorite is Revelation 1:17-18. You look at all your anxieties and you think about like, what is that compared to being raised from the dead on the last day by the one who has already passed through death and has promised to bring us through that and to raise us again. I mean, as best as we can as humans and being sinful, I mean, when you remember that, I mean, it makes everything look so small.
My confirmation verse is Joshua 1:9. So it's something like that verse that tells me, get with it. God has commanded you, go out there into the world and be strong, take on your challenges. I think something like that is very powerful for somebody like me who really, really needs to quit over analyzing things and just go out and do stuff and go out and be bold and live for Christ and ultimately let go of a lot of concerns and fears that you have about the world.
Hopefully you remember, because it's like become my life verse since 2015. But Philippians 2, it's not about you. Like, I think that so much.
Yes.
It's like a funny, hilarious joke. Yeah. But literally, I take a couple seconds every day. I'm like, oh my gosh, Paige, Philippians 2, it's not about you. It's about God, and it's about how we can live our lives as lights to Him instead of just trying to be the best I can be. And I guess thinking about, being myself without being selfish, but also like being who God created you to be instead of who you think you should be too, is something like definitely what sticks out to me.
And I like the Bible verse, fear not, because it's simple. You know, it's not detailed or lengthy or whatnot. It's like, you know, it's, hey, chill out, fear not, God's with you. Don't worry about it. You know, just keep doing what you're doing and he'll figure out all the details. So that's why I like it. You know, it's straightforward, like, hey, stop being fearful. Keep working for today and tomorrow will come.
But how has God played a major role in your life and struggles with some of these aspects we've talked about today?
The part that I have issues with thinking about is like God having an influence and like caring enough about my personal life. Why would he want to do that? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, I'm not that much of an impressive person. Somehow I am important enough for him to have a hand in my life. I had a lot of like fond memories of my family and my dad specifically. So like saying Our Father really helps me with that relationship because it relates my relationship with God to somebody I have concrete trust with in my life. That kind of imagery helps me have that level of trust.
The law that I think I receive most often is sort of a first commandment kind of law, in that, you know, who's my God? The whole idea of, like, you know, what you fear and you love and you trust, that's your God, is something that I've come back to over and over again, because I'm afraid of a lot of things, but they don't deserve it. You know, those things, they have not earned my fear. We should and can trust people and things and on earth, but there's a deeper trust that only God deserves to have, and it's the trust that can't fail. The gospel of that and the gospel to that is I don't have to be afraid of those things. That doesn't mean I always feel that, because it's not always a felt reality, but is a true reality. It's law when I'm, you know, standing there going, I'm paralyzed by all my fear of all these various things. But it is a sweet, sweet gospel when I realize, I don't have to be. That's one of those things. God being above all things can be scary when you're on the wrong side. But when you know that in Christ, God is for you, then all of a sudden you can start to get a glimpse that maybe everything will be all right after all.
One of my biggest, I guess you could call, downfalls is that my fear/anxiety can get the best of me. Just reminding myself that, like, not all those fears and thoughts and anxieties that I have are real. They might be valid, but they're not necessarily real or productive. And so just reminding myself what is true helps to kind of keep me on the right path of thought. And sometimes I fall into, you know, the trap of not going to God and not trusting what he says. And in those moments, it's kind of scary, because if I didn't have God in those moments, my life would be way different.
I feel that God has certainly always been with me through my life, which has just been fantastic, and just what a great blessing, especially some of the mental health changes I've gone through and learning about the different coping skills and learning about myself. As life's gone on, I've learned to trust more in God, and especially those moments of fear, turning towards God. And like we talked about with the that's a square. With a triangle, that competitiveness and all that from the 3, it makes me move to that 9 of that concept of that peace. That brings a lot of comfort to me. So it makes sense that engaging in religious activities and engaging with the religious community around me helps move more towards that 9 and that healthier side for me. So that's all good in my book.
I'm always going to kind of end up going back to the sacraments, because in baptism, you know, you feel that water on you, and you are assured of your entrance into God's family and that assurance of salvation, and you can taste and see and, you know, have that tangible assurance of the forgiveness, and that Christ is literally there on the altar for us when we don't have the faith to remember that he is with us at all times. We can point there because he's promised to be there. If I want to, you know that Christ is there, I just go and take communion. So that's a huge comfort. And of course, going back to the word and hearing that and taking it to heart, and read, mark, inwardly digest it.
It's amazing to me how no matter where somebody is on the personality index, Jesus really meets them like where they are. So every single one of his parables addresses needs and concerns of everybody. not just one group or one person or any subcategory. You start out with a surface level, Jesus loves me, for the Bible tells me so. And then you learn more about something like this where you see that really, really applied to the deepest aspects of yourself. In this way, as I am now, Jesus is meeting me where I'm at. What it teaches me is that ultimately what you believed at the beginning with Jesus is still true. Yes, isn't it amazing that for somebody as weird and with things all around as me, that Jesus could still work in my life, but he still meets me where I'm at, and then still goes back to what I originally knew was true, which is Jesus still loves me because the Bible tells me.
I don't know. The word I always keep coming back to is like steadfast. Even when I'm trying to control things on my own, I'm a big control freak. I won't always admit it. I don't like being in charge, but like knowing what's happening exactly when and what is going to happen so I can prepare for what is going to happen. I feel like just thinking about him, like just always being here. I don't know. I've talked about like being far away from home and like how hard that is, like, and like being with people who have known you your whole life. Like God has known me my whole life, and he's known me since like before I was alive. I don't know. That's super comforting for me to think about, in the sense where like when I feel like nobody else out here is here for me or supporting me or knows me in a personal way, because I feel like you're just trying to get to know people and it's uncomfortable, but you just put yourself out there the best way that you can. Like, I don't have to do that with God. He knows everything about me, and I don't even have to say anything. I can just have like a screaming prayer and he understands what I meant by that. Just like God sees me like perfectly, like in his image, and like, yes, I'm a sinner, but he also sees Christ in me. And that's like, oh, okay. Thank you, God.
I look at a lot of the certain aspects of my life where there's been major decision points, major decisions like joining the military, for example. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, well, is this something that I should be doing, or is this something that I shouldn't be doing because, you know, there's not a whole lot of military experience in my family. You know, ultimately I did it. It was my first couple of days in the military. You know, I met a friend who has become my best friend. God was with me on that decision. You know, I had an opportunity in Lincoln to take a job in Lincoln. It's like, well, should I stay here in Omaha and suck it up and tough it out, or should I move back to Lincoln? It was something I really struggled with, you know, and ultimately I made the decision to move back to Lincoln. And, you know, within a couple months I met Andy, you know, so obviously, you know, one of those things where it's like, well, you know, obviously it was a good decision, you know, it turned out pretty well for me. So I think that, you know, we as humans have the ability to make a decision, and every decision that we make is going to be the appropriate one as long as we keep Christ in that decision.
So the last question that we have, the last melon, is what encouragement or advice would you say to someone who is also your number?
Try and find those people you trust. You need to be willing to put that out there, to get yourself some friends, to have trust in other people. Remembering that you trust them because, okay, I know who they actually are. I know what they're going to be like, is an important thing to remember as you're going forward, because you're not always going to have the rosy good times, but that doesn't mean that the trust or the security that you've built up is broken. It means that what you're going through right now is going to be difficult, but you can figure out a way to get back to that trust, and it'll still be okay at the end of it.
Having a sort of worrying or anxious relationship with the world doesn't define you. Like, you are not fear. It can be easy to turn life into a series of cost-benefit analyses, or looking at like risk factors there are here, or, you know, what backup plan do I need to have? That doesn't need to be all that you are. And the other side of it is to lean into those strengths. I think true courage is being able to act in a way that is true to who you are and true to your ideals and true to your values and care for others and loyalty and all those great things, acting despite fear. That's there. That potential is there. And it might show up when you don't realize it. I know it has for me. So
I guess my advice would be to always lean on God in those moments when your fear and anxiety and controlling nature can take over. God has given us all different qualities. We might be lacking in something, somebody else has that quality. So don't be intimidated, I guess, to ask others for help or just be open and raw with others and let them know what you're struggling with. Because I think going into those struggles alone is when we all get in trouble. And also realizing that like God has made you this way. To you, certain qualities might seem as a hindrance. They're beautiful because that's how God made you. So yeah.
The concept of self-awareness, just being aware of your number, trusting in God always, and then understanding what your sin is, your deadly sin is, and how to find some coping skills or things to get you into more of that healthy area. All those sixes going, you know what, I need to tell you this 8 or 10 times because you're not listening. Do not fear, I told you.
To know that no matter what you're anxious about, that Christ is taking care of it, and that Christ is always there for you, and to always go back to your scripture and to talk to your pastors and receive the sacraments and remember your baptism. It's just, don't just go to one thing to try and soothe your anxiety, and use your strengths to reflect Christ.
Help me.
You know?
I mean, be strong and courageous. Do not be discouraged. Do not be afraid, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. I mean, that means a lot to me. You will have the same problems of overthinking things and having trust issues in some ways, but you can overanalyze things and be scared of everything and come up with ways to be fearful about anything that nobody else even considered. But through that, you have to realize that there is a plan, there is a purpose to the universe, and it all works for the glory of God.
I don't know. It's okay not to be okay, but it's also like 100% okay to trust yourself, even if you make a mistake. Just trust yourself and like, don't be afraid to make mistakes, but also like make them proudly, or like, don't hide from your self-criticism. Like, it's okay to, it's okay to be hard on yourself as long as it's not overwhelming, which I definitely fall short of a lot of the time. Just be you and be who God designed you to be, not what anyone else thinks you should be or what you think you should be, because sometimes our worst enemies are ourselves.
So the loyalist, focus on what you're loyal to. You want to be loyal to, obviously, you have to have priorities. You want to be loyal to God. You want to be loyal to your family. You want to be loyal to your friends. But, with that friend aspect, you have to be careful about, being loyal to friends that may pull you away from God or pull you away from family. We shouldn't not be their friend just because they're not a Christian, but we can't let them distract us from our priorities and where our loyalties lie, because that's going to distract you from your family, from Christ. It's not going to be healthy. We should still, be intentional about spending time with them, talking to them about Christ and whatnot. But yeah, know where you need to be loyal to.
Oh, snap. Oh, wow. You are done. That is impressive. Thank you for coming to the end. You're watching the ending. So thank you for watching. I hope that this encourages you, that you were inspired by this, that it points you to Christ, and then reminds you that you are not alone. So yeah, I hope it really did. And the other episodes are in the link down below, the description. They're links. So check them out if you would like to check that out as well. Thanks for your time. Hope to see you soon.
Oh, here's one thing I'll say on the record.
Okay.
Laura Lee's guitar playing is better than everybody else's. I don't care what everybody else says.
Oh my gosh.